Let's start making connections, which I think is probably what I want to do. Start off with the beginning. My name is David Tal or David Goldberg, depending on who you ask. Like any married woman, I have two last names. And the idea is that I am here tonight, more than anything, representing my people, the people of Israel, God's chosen people. And I'm here to explain about a massive war that's going on, both in Israel and all over the world. But those of you who know what happened on the 7th of October know how horrific it was. So I've been doing this lately. I want to start off with a moment of silence for the victims of that Saturday morning, for the hostages that are still lost and abused somewhere in Gaza. And I'm going to add on for the people of Gaza who are suffering a terrible, terrible ordeal for no fault of their own. So let's take a moment of silence. Please close your eyes and remember all of these suffering in prayer. Lord, we remember that these are all your creatures. And remember that you are the Prince of Peace. Help us understand what's going on and bring peace to the Middle East, to Israel, to Gaza, and to the west of the world. And please come as soon as you can. We pray in Jesus' name. I'm going to start off with a little bit of an explanation of who I am, basically, and that's part of the story, I guess. A little bit of an explanation of what's going on in Israel, and maybe we'll widen the scope a little bit wider, and a little bit of an explanation about the war that is taking place even right here, right now, in the United States of America and different places. Let's start off with the beginning. The name is David Tal. I'm Israeli. But I was born in San Diego. And my background maybe kind of plays a little bit of a role. Both of my parents are American. My dad's from Baltimore, I think is the way you say it. My mom's from Colorado. And they both came from dysfunctional families and for all kinds of reasons met in San Diego in a tiny little church. My dad was a sailor. My mom was trying to figure out what's going on in her life. They met. They fell in love in a little church. My dad grew up as a Jew, and when he was in the Navy, had an accident, and his Navy buddies brought him a Gideon's Bible to the hospital. And my dad said, wait a minute, I'm the Christian guy in this squad, what are you bringing me this Christian book? And somebody told my dad, you don't get it. It's a book that was written by Jews for Jews. And my dad was saved in the hospital. And then found my mom in the church, and then they got married, and then they found me. No, they didn't find me, but, came together. And the young family decided that they want to be missionaries in Africa. Back then, it was very kind of moody. My dad's an aircraft mechanic. He wanted to be a missionary pilot. They went to Moody Bible Institute. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. And at Moody, my dad realized a couple of things. First thing, he realized that as opposed to what he thought originally, you don't quit being a Jew when you decide to follow Jesus. There was an idea that you can be either Jewish or you can be Christian. He thought that he quit being a Jew and became a Christian. His father, by the way, thought the same thing. And he realized at Moody that, no, that's not the way it goes. You know that all of the early Christians were Jews. In fact, I'm going to say something really weird that a lot of people kind of get freaked out. You know that Jesus wasn't a Christian. That's weird. Okay, but basically at Moody he realized that he is still a Jew. And the second thing he realized is that he wanted to teach his people, to bring the gospel to his people and not to people in Africa. So in 1966, the young family moves to Israel, and I have been in Israel more or less ever since, besides about 2 years in Roswell, New Mexico, before we knew that the aliens were there. But basically, that was my American time. That's where the accent comes from. But I was born in the States, but grew up in Israel. So I know all the rules of American football, I think, unless you've changed something in the last week. And I probably know more American slang than most of the Israelis that I know. And for some reason, God has prepared me in that way to bring some of this message to you. Just to tie in a couple more bits of this, the Messianic movement in Israel, what we call the born-again Christian movement in Israel, is not an easy place to grow up, because more evil has been done to the Jewish people in the name of Christianity down through history than any other name. And I grew up as the neighborhood Christian in a Jewish environment. You understand what that means? So there were lessons about the Crusaders that I had to be out of the classroom running very fast, very, very quickly. So I'm tying this all together so you get a little bit of an understanding about how all of this works. We're a small community, the Messianic movement. We don't even call ourselves Christians. We call ourselves believers. My dad we went to a congregation, not to a church. I mean, in order to differentiate ourselves, kind of move ourselves away from the classical Christianity. And it's a small movement, but very strong, very dedicated, and going through a serious trial. If some of you have notebooks, start writing down prayer requests, because some of them are going to come up along the way. But pray for the Christians in Israel. Everybody that I know between the age of 18 and 40 is now in the military in uniform. Everybody, all the people that I grew up with, everybody, all my friends, everybody that we know is now in uniform. And the Messianic movement needs a lot of prayer, okay, for what's going on. I've got nephews that are now inside the fighting, and this week we heard the terrible news that one of the first of the soldiers, Messianic soldiers who were wounded, is very badly wounded, is now in the hospital fighting for his life. So if you want to pray specifically for somebody that is close to us, a young Christian infantryman named Amitai, okay, has lost both his legs and at least one of his eyes, and is fighting for his life literally as we speak. That's what war is in Israel. So that's just a little bit of who we are. Like everybody else, at the age of 18, I went into the military, and I tried to make the Air Force. The Air Force thought I wasn't good enough. I ended up in a tank, okay, and rose through the ranks over the years. I am still an active major in the IDF, though I'm a little bit too old. The wrinkles here in the tummy kind of, it's one of the main reasons I'm here fighting this battle in the States and not on the side in the back of a tank in Gaza. But maybe to add on just one more piece of the story, so my background comes a little bit through. You guys know what a PK is, right? Pastor's kid, preacher's kid. I was a PK, and every family has one of the black sheeps. I was the PK in my family that walked away. And for many, many years, left the faith, is the way we say it. Walked, not so much in sin, married a nice Jewish woman, had kids, had a family, but disconnected to my faith. And weirdly, amazingly, almost 4 years ago now, I had a spiritual event on the beach in no other place than Seal Beach. I don't know if you know where that is. And God spoke to me directly on the beach in Seal Beach, which was weird to me because I'm a tour guide in Israel. Everybody goes to have their spiritual event over there, and I had to come over here to have my spiritual event. And I was kind of crying for my son and everything that I've gone through. And God said to me in Hebrew, shachrer. Shachrer in Hebrew means let go. And the first thing I'm thinking to myself is, why is God speaking Hebrew in California? It's kind of weird. But then he says, hu lo shelcha, hu sheli, which in Hebrew means he's not yours, he's mine. And I put my son on that altar that day in Seal Beach, and my life changed forever. And I gave my life to God, and it took me a while to figure out, but then I gave my life to Jesus, and then it took me a while to figure out, then I went and got baptized in the Mediterranean Sea in Israel the first time, and then again in California. And now I'm a follower of Christ after many, many years, and yes, I need a round of applause for that, because that is a major miracle. But to make the long story short, that is my background, and that is who I am. I've been a tour guide for the last couple of years, but I think that all of that has brought me to where I am today, and the role that I think God has for me to play here, even in this amazing church right now. And what I would like to do is kind of introduce to you, explain to you, and bring you to what's happening in Israel and how it happened, maybe a little bit about why it happened, and then go into what that means for all of us and all of you, basically, in this period that we're actually stepping into. Most of you know what happened on October 8th, a group of between 1,000 and 1,500 Hamas, Palestinian terrorists, I'm going to call them for lack of a better word, which is the opposite of the critical word, broke through the fence, the defensive fence around the Gaza Strip, probably about 15 or 18 different holes in the fence, and scrambled through the fence, went into some of the bases that are literally around the fence, surrounding the fence, and then actually went on a killing spree in towns, villages, and communities inside Israel. At the end of this, 1,400 Israelis were, I'm going to say, murdered in the most brutal, terrible fashion that you can think. I don't want to go into the details because we're all people here, but think about the worst thing that you've ever seen on an R-rated movie, and it was worse than that. In the end, Israel actually scrambled. We brought in, and we pushed them back across the fence. But Israel has been scarred and wounded in the most terrible manner. And what I need you to understand that for us, people talk about this being our 9/11. Maybe people talk about this being our Pearl Harbor, which is much, much deeper. That might be. Give a combination of those. But for us, everything changed on that Sunday morning. We thought we were a great army, a very powerful army. We don't think that anymore. We thought we were really smart. We knew what was going on. We don't think that anymore. We thought we had the best intelligence agency in the world. We don't think that anymore. We thought we could defend our families, our children. We don't think that anymore. And anybody here who is a father or mother who has children knows that deep, deep feeling that as a result of us making a terrible mistake, the people that we love the most have been hurt, or in this case, 250 of them are actually still being held captive inside Gaza by these terrible terrorists. Some of them 6 months old. Some of them 82 years old. It's incomprehensible for us. So the first thing is the horror, the hurt. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning with all the explosions. Israel is smaller than New Jersey, just so you get a little bit of an understanding. One of the ways I like to say it in California, 19 Israels fit inside the state of California, just so you get the size that we're talking about. And so from my balcony in Modin, I can actually hear the explosions going on in Gaza, and I can see the missiles coming out of Gaza and the Iron Dome intercepting the missiles. Shock. How did this happen to us? Then that, when we started to realize what was going on, turned into anger. Anger. I mean, this is something that we have to take care of. And what has happened since then, and we're talking about a month ago, basically is that, first of all, we're treating our wounded. We've evacuated all of the communities, all of the houses, all the homes close around Israel. So they've been evacuated. We have brought in the reserves in the military, and about a week and a half ago, Israel actually entered the Gaza Strip with the dedicated role of wiping out the Hamas. The Hamas is the Palestinian fundamentalist, jihadi, Islamic organization that has been the de facto governor of the Gaza Strip since 2006. So the idea is to wipe out the Hamas and bring our hostages back. So that's what Israel is doing right now. And since we are talking about this, I want to make a couple of side notes because I've been dealing with this and I'm seeing what the world has been saying about Israel. No, we don't want to wipe out the Palestinians. I have nothing against Palestinians. No, we don't want to wipe out all the people who live in Gaza. Yes, I want to kill those animals. The ones who perpetrated this terrible terror attack, they deserve to meet their God, is the way we like to say it. And Israel is going in to make sure that happens. But again, we're not out against anybody. We've asked the Palestinian population, the local population, to move out of the area that the fighting has taken place. That's the city of Gaza. And we're trying to do our best to minimize civilian casualties. But the enemy very, very shrewdly is using the civilians inside Gaza as human shields. And I've seen it, I can prove it, I can show it to you. I mean, there's no reason. So they put their military apparatus inside buildings that other people live in. So one apartment is a family, another apartment is a family, and the third apartment is a communication center for the Hamas. I mean, you get the idea. Or they put them underneath the buildings. So there's a whole tunnel system underneath Gaza, and that's what's being dealt with right now. Something else happened. Something else happened that is a little bit deeper for us, and I need you to kind of figure out what we're talking about. When I say Israelis, I mean people who live in Israel. Now, 75% of the population in Israel are Jews. When I say Jews, I'm talking about people who are descendants, directly or indirectly, descendants of Abraham. Okay, we are the Jewish people. The reason we're called the Jewish people is because we come from a place called Judea, okay, which is named Judea after Judah, one of the tribes. Okay, you guys with me on this one? So we actually connect ourselves to that. And the reason that we are in that little corner of the Middle East, okay, that many people call Palestine, I'm going to call the Promised Land, is because it was promised to us by none other than God himself. In Genesis 12, God said, I am God. Here's the land. Here's the people. This is the people that I have chosen. Here's the land that I have promised you. Me, people, and land, we are connected. And as far as I'm concerned, and I hope as far as you're concerned, when God makes a promise, that's it. Etched in stone. God does never, never, never goes back on his promises. Now, we know that he doesn't because he is God, but I'm going to say something else. You better hope he doesn't. Because if God goes back on his promises to the Jewish people, his chosen people, or to the promised land, okay, if he goes back on that promise, how do you know he's not going to go back on the promise that he made to you, that you are saved? How do you know that after all of this, you're going to die and go to heaven, and you're going to find out that there was a mistake? God has changed the conditions. So as far as I'm concerned, that is the promised land. It was dedicated to my people, and that's where we became a people. I'm going to use a term that a lot of people don't use because it's kind of weird. We call this our ancestral homeland. I don't know if you've ever heard that term because people talk about ancestral homelands when they talk about the Aborigines in Australia. This is where the people became a people. People talk about an ancestral homeland when they talk about, let's say, the Black Hills of Dakota. I mean, you know, and that's an ancestral homeland. If there ever was such a thing as an ancestral homeland, the hills of Judea are the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Does that make sense? We wrote the Bible there. That's where Jesus came. This is where all of these. So we have this connection. So when we go back to our ancestral homeland in the early 1900s, okay, it wasn't easy because during the time that we've been going, and God punished us horrifically for our stupidness, okay? We come back to our ancestral homeland. There were other people there. And I'm going to say this very clearly. Israel has tried. The Jewish people have tried. My people have tried to reach an agreement with the other people living there again and again and again. In 1935, we said, let's share this land. In 1947, we said, let's share this land. In 1948, after the War of Independence, we said, let's share this land. 1967, after the Six-Day War, we tried to share the land. And again, we tried to share this land. And the people who were living there, or at least a large majority of them, did not want to share. So Israel has had no choice but to create this little tiny nation that we call Israel in the middle of the Middle East and turn it into whatever we see. Some of our enemies have tried to destroy us. We fought in 1948 against 5 Arab nations. We fought in 1967 against 3 Arab nations. We fought in 1973 against 2 Arab nations. I think the Arab nations have decided, but there still is a large group of people who, for Muslim, Islamic, religious reasons, decide that we cannot share the land. They're called jihadists, okay? And they're part of the Muslim Brotherhood that believes that the whole world should be Muslim. And the Palestinian version of the Muslim Brotherhood, anybody know what it's called? The Hamas. That is who we are fighting in Gaza. They don't believe in a joint ownership of the land. They don't believe in reaching a two-state solution. They don't believe in reaching an agreement. They believe, and they say it very, very clearly in their charter, they believe in the destruction of the state of Israel. We've known that ever since they were created in 1988. So the Hamas is in control of the Gaza Strip. Israel was in control of the Gaza Strip from 1967 to 2005. And in 2005, we left the Gaza Strip, meaning from 2005 or 2006, there are no Israelis in Gaza. Did you know that? We have not occupied anything from Gaza. There's no Israelis inside. We've not done anything. There's no apartheid in Gaza. There's a Hamas military government in Gaza ever since. But they've never given up on trying to destroy us. So in the beginning, they started crossing over the border and attacking us. We put up a fence and we put an obstacle. Then they started tunneling underneath. We put a sophisticated system underneath so they cannot tunnel underneath. Then they started shooting rockets into us. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Iron Dome. And for the last, I'm going to say 10, 15 years, there's been this back and forth between us and the Hamas. And that's a backdrop for what happened in October 8th, October 7th. And here's what I need to explain. We made a mistake. We dropped the ball. We did not realize how dedicated they were to the mass murder of civilians. We did not realize. We thought there were little of them. We thought they were trying to be more indicative. A lot of people have asked me over the last couple of weeks, what happened? How did Israel's great army kind of drop the ball on this? We were convincing ourselves that the enemy could be appeased. We were convincing ourselves that there isn't deep-rooted, diabolical, satanic evil in the world. And we were wrong. What you saw in that attack is unadulterated evil. I'm not saying everybody in the Palestinian area is evil. I'm saying those people had bought into a deeply satanic evil in a way that few people in the world have. Now, the world has seen evil like that before. I could go back to Imperial Japan, okay, and we know some of the stories. Or a classic example would be Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany has created evil, been created by evil that was so thick that the whole regime had bought into this evil ideology that mass murder is an accepted practice for human beings. And a side note, and maybe this is something that I need to kind of explain because it's going to connect to what we're talking about. I'm not saying that everybody in Germany in World War II was evil. But I'm saying that sometimes Satan manages to create an environment, a condition where evil starts growing on itself, where it spreads more than just one person into an environment of evil, a garden of evil, for lack of a better word, okay, where the people who come in touch with that are in touch with that evil. Anybody who's been and heard anything about the Holocaust and World War II, by the way, it wasn't only Jews that were killed in the Holocaust. There were 11 million people that were mass murdered by the Nazis in the Holocaust. That is an evil that the world is not really used to. And I'm going to say what happened in Gaza during the Hamas doesn't mean that everybody is terrible, but an evil embedded itself, a deeply rooted satanic evil embedded itself there that allowed at least 1,500 people to believe that it is okay to put babies in the oven. Do you understand what is happening? So what I'm trying to say is, when you teach your children, when you go to Sunday school, when you stand in the pulpit, I need to remind everybody, because it seems like we've been forgetting, there is such a thing as evil in the world. And the only way to fight evil is with godliness. And that's what we need to connect to today. 2 more words about what's going on in the backdrop. When the Hamas attacked, there was a feeling that this could turn into an all-out war. And I'm going to go quickly over the political situation around us for those of you who don't know. The Hamas is on the south corner, the southwestern corner of Israel in the Gaza Strip. By the way, anybody know who died in Gaza, biblically? Anybody remember a guy named Samson? Okay, Gaza's always been a balagan for us. I don't know if you understand that. But that's the southwestern corner. On the northern border, across the border in Lebanon, is another terrorist organization called the Hezbollah, which is as evil as the Hamas and much better armed and much better funded by the Iranians. And everybody thought that the Hezbollah, the minute the war with Gaza takes place, would go into a battle and Israel would be fighting on the front on the south and the front on the north. As of this morning, for lack of a better word, okay, the Hezbollah has not entered into the battle, and if we have time for Q&A, maybe we can go into why that happens. The Iranian regime, which is actually funding both the Hezbollah and the Hamas, has decided that they are willing to throw the Hamas, who actually were doing their work, throw the Hamas under the bus, but they don't want to throw the Hezbollah under the bus. And as of now, Israel is fighting the battle for the Hamas, with the Hamas in Gaza. The Hezbollah in the north has not turned into a war, and this war has not spread out to the rest of the Middle East. But I'm going to tie it together, just one scenario that kind of puts this in the proper place, because knowing a little bit about your pastor, I think most of you would recognize what I'm talking about right now. Let's say the Hezbollah does decide to fire more than the 20 rockets they fire at us, and Israel decides to retaliate. As a result of that, the Hezbollah fires the 150,000 rockets that they have at Israel. Israel, in order to stop that, will pull out all stops, and we would probably use the Air Force to flatten most of southern Lebanon. The world, by the way, is going to come out against Israel, because the world comes out against Israel no matter what. The Iranians will decide to use this as an excuse. We'll start attacking American assets in Syria. I don't know if you heard that they started to do that. The Americans would react against that. That would bring out an all-out war between the American forces in the Middle East and the Iranians. This would be the excuse that Putin needs to kind of tie it in together. So he's going to get his fingers into the war, because he has major bases in Syria today, and he wants to take the attention off the whole situation in Ukraine. And while all of this is happening and things are blowing up all over the Middle East, the Chinese decide this is a time to take Taiwan. And lo and behold, what I've just now pointed out or stressed out is not science fiction and not a Joel Rosenberg book. This is the book of Revelation. I don't know if you followed that dynamic. So we're on the edge of that. We are literally on the edge of that. And I need you to understand, when you look at the news and you look at what's going on, I want you to have the book of Revelation here in the back, and everything that means. Now, I'm going to be careful not to be a prophet. I'm going to be careful not to be a priest, not to be a pastor, not to be a politician. Weird that they all start with a P. I don't know why. But I don't know if that is what's going to happen. And I'm going to say this. Jesus said very clearly that nobody knows. But he also said, look at the signs and be ready. And that's what I need you to see right now. If there ever were signs, it's now. And if ever you needed to be ready, it's now. And if ever you needed your cousin, your uncle, your mother who doesn't believe to be ready, it's now. Don't wait, because this is critical. It could happen like that. Literally, it could happen in a week. And you see how this is happening, and it kind of feels like we're on the edge of this. On the other hand, it might not happen. And if this goes in the other direction. Israel will finish taking out the Hamas's military capabilities. Israel will probably occupy the Gaza Strip for a while. And the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip, listen to what I said, the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip will take place in order to create some kind of hope for the Palestinians. So theoretically, the end of Hamas could be the beginning of a whole peace movement that connects Israel, what's happening in Gaza, the Palestinians in the West Bank, Jordan, more than anybody, Saudi Arabia, a land bridge between Asia and Israel, and lo and behold, we're in the final piece of end times, and that also is part of the prophetic stages that actually need to come to the final stage. What I'm trying to say is you are seeing biblical prophecy playing out on CNN, BBC, and Fox News. You're seeing it happen. And this is what I need you to understand. I think most Americans sitting here don't really realize the importance of the event that we're talking about. And then I'm sitting here as an Israeli and I'm watching what's going on. And I have to say something very interesting. Listen, I'm Jewish. I mean, Jews, we have anti-Semitism baked into our DNA. I don't know if you know, but we all grow up with their stories. We actually celebrate it. I don't know if you know. Anybody know what a Jewish holiday is? You know, Jewish holidays, Hanukkah, Purim, Passover. What's the basic idea behind the Jewish holiday? It goes like this. They tried to kill us. They didn't kill us. Let's eat. That's only half a joke. Because think about growing up year after year celebrating people who wanted to kill you because you're Jewish. Look at the book of Esther. Why did he want to kill us? Because we were Jewish. Okay? Look at Exodus. Okay? And what I'm trying to say is we know what killing Jews is about. I'll give you another example. How many Jews are there in the world? Anybody know? Somebody throw a number. 16 million? 17 million? Okay? If we came out of Exodus, out of Egypt in Exodus, 3,800 years ago, about 1.5 million, how many Jews should be in the world today? Billions. Where are all the Jews? We're God's chosen people. But if anybody saw Fiddler on the Roof, anybody see Fiddler on the Roof? Remember? There's a time where Fiddler is about the Jewish persecution in Eastern Europe. That's my family story, basically. But Tuvia kind of is praying to God and saying, God, I know we're the Jewish people. We're the chosen people. I know. But couldn't you have chosen somebody else? We have suffered for being the apple of God's eye. And when somebody wants to attack God, the best way, the easiest way, is to attack God's people. And what I'm trying to say is this attack that you're watching playing out on CNN is not just an attack about Israel. It's not another event in Ukraine. It's not something that's happened in Indochina. This is an attack on God's chosen people. And if you want to understand what's going on, you need to understand the complexity of this. And then here's what happens. And again, I'm Jewish. I'm watching this. I'm Israeli. I'm Jewish. I'm watching this. And for 48 hours, it was really interesting. After this terrible, devastating attack where more Jews have died in one day than during the Holocaust, okay? After all of this, we were the victims for 48 hours. For 48 hours, the world said, poor Jews, poor Israelis, this is terrible. This is horrible. Okay, people realized how terrible this was. But it lasted only for 48 hours. Because after 48 hours, we start hearing things that we as Jews know very well. Yeah, it's terrible what happened to you, but we really feel sad for you, but it is horrific what happened, but. And the but could be anything. Oh, those poor Palestinians are in an enclosed prison. This is a jailbreak. False. But that's part of it. Or you should have known this was coming. I like that one. You should have seen it coming. You should have known this is going to happen. You have the strongest military. The fact that you, with the strongest military in the Middle East, let this happen, there is some responsibility. I need to say something about this because this hurts me personally. Listen, I've been a warrior. I've been a soldier all my life. Until about 6 years ago, I would have been in Gaza today, or I did 30 days on the tank most of my life. And what I'm trying to say, it's been my job to defend this country. And when people say there's some justification to what happened because we let it happen, that boils my blood. And I'll give you an illustration that I'm kind of trying to figure out how to can explain this to people, because this is really important, because I've heard this too many times. We live in a bad neighborhood. And some of you probably live in a bad neighborhood, and you know, as a father, this is my point of view, you've got children in the house, your wife is in the house, your grandma's in the house, okay? And it's your job to defend these people. So you put up a lock on the door, and you put up a surveillance system, and you buy a gun, and you put a gun in the safe somewhere, and you know that it's your job to make sure that nothing happens to your family. And I'm going to say this with shame. And then one day you don't lock the door. And the enemy, who's been waiting for this chance, uses this chance to come into your house, to rape your wife, to steal your children, to kidnap your grandma. We're going to have to live with that for the rest of our lives. But let's make this clear. We're not to blame for what happened. The people who are to blame are the ones who did perpetrate that crime. And I'm trying to make this clear. Let nobody blame me for not knocking the door. I will blame me for not knocking the door, for not locking the door. Blame the people who raped my wife. Blame the people who stole my children. Let's make this very clear. So what I'm trying to say is, this is how we see it. And for 48 hours, I start hearing people say, wait a minute, you let this happen. It's your responsibility. It's your responsibility with the Palestinians, your responsibility this. And then I hear the truth completely distorted. Israel is an occupying nation. No, we never occupied anything in Gaza. Israel is pulling off ethnic cleansing. No, we've never ethnic cleansed anybody in Gaza. Listen, I've been there, I know that. Israel is pulling off a genocide. And here's the thing. More and more people believe the lies. And I'm sitting here, I'm sitting in the state in Israel later on, and sitting here, and I'm saying, how is this happening? How do rational, normal people buy into the lies? Now, remember, I'm Jewish. Okay, so in the past, people have blamed us for using the blood of Christian children to make matzah and Passover. I don't know if you've ever heard that story. I mean, it was something that we were blamed for. And what was always weird to me is not that people come up with the idea, it's the fact that normal, rational, God-loving people believe it. And it took me a while to feel, why is it that Israel is being blamed for this? Why is it that we're being selected? Why is it that we're being pulled out for a different designation? Why is it that 600,000 Arabs died in the Civil War? More than 600, probably about 800,000 Arabs died in Syria during the Civil War in Syria, and nobody said a thing. But when 1,000 Palestinians die as a result of something terrible that they did, Israel is being blamed for being the monster in this. You guys following me in this? And I know what was going on in Syria. I've seen it. Okay? I never saw on the demonstration for the terrible, terrible things that happened in the civil war in Yemen. The civil war in Yemen, at least 900,000 people have died in that civil war. Do you know what a Yemenite flag looks like? 600, 800,000 people have died in the civil war in Syria. Do you know what a Syrian flag looks like? 8,000 people die in Gaza, in Palestine. Do you know what a Palestinian flag looks like? You've all seen it on the news. Why? Because they weren't killed by other Arabs, because they were killed by Jews. And I realized that this is not a fight for the border. This is not a fight for nationality. This is a fight against God's chosen people. But it doesn't seem like that. Nobody says that. The deceit, the falsehood, and the lying has actually taken root. And then I say to myself, wait a minute, how did this happen? And I realized that there's been a concentrated, organized movement to change the concept of truth. And then you look back a little bit, and I'm looking at your civilization from my side of the ocean, and I'm saying, wait a minute. Something's been happening in this culture for probably the last decade and a half. Because for the last decade and a half, the concept of truth has been completely destroyed. Not the truth of any, but the idea of truth has been destroyed. All of a sudden, there's no such thing as truth. There's no such thing as right and wrong. There's no such thing as true and false. Everything is on a spectrum. Everything is on a scale. Everybody's got his own truth. The goddess of truth told us all that everybody's truth is relevant. I think his name is Oprah Winfrey. I mean, everybody has his own truth. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, I grew up with this book. This is truth. This is where, I call this, my dad used to call it a truth filter. You put an event, a story, a question in here, out comes truth. That's what this is. There's no such thing as relative truth. I don't always know the truth. I don't always figure out. Sometimes I see it differently, but that doesn't mean there isn't truth. The basic aspect of all human civilization, there is a thing called truth. There is a thing called right, and there is a thing called wrong. The word truth is mentioned here 333 times in the New King James. The Bible talks about truth again and again and again, but then how does this happen that everything is happening, that the truth is relative, that somebody can say something completely untrue and somebody accept it as a truth? And I realized something else. It's not by chance that he is called the great deceiver. It's not by chance that one of the tools of the trade of Satan is lying, deceit, deception, falsehood. It's not by chance that the whole concept of truth is being eroded. And then they said, wait a minute, if he is eroding truth, why is he doing that? And you open up your Bible, and Jesus said it very clearly. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father, nobody connects to God if he is not connected to truth. And if you erode truth, if you take apart truth, you are eroding God in our culture. Because godliness is truth. Truth is godliness. And I realize that something else is happening. There's a war in my land. People are bleeding and dying, literally right now. But there's another war going on that started before this. But I think the deceiver has been preparing the backdrop, has been preparing the feeding system, okay, for a complete erosion of the concept of truth, of what is true. And what you're seeing going on, you're hearing the argument. You're hearing, even in your political system, okay, is now being kind of polarized. There are people who believe this truth, and there's people who believe that truth, and it's become acceptable in our culture that everybody has his own truth. But if you read the Bible, and I know that you've been reading the Bible, and you've been listening to your pastor, you know that there is such a thing as truth. You know that there is such a thing as right and wrong. You know that there is such a thing as false. So you know that. So if you are seeing the world walking down this road of everybody's got his own truth, everybody got his own idea, you're seeing a battle for something that is much, much deeper than what is happening in Israel. We saw it happening. Everybody's got his own truth. I mean, I know what my truth is. I might have been born a man, but my truth says that I'm a woman. And who's going to tell me there's anything otherwise? Okay, I was born this way. I think this way. I believe this way. And what I'm watching is this erosion of, okay, what I feel. I mean, doesn't matter what I'm called. I mean, you're going to give me my pronoun. You're going to accept my truth. This is my truth. Accept it. If you don't accept the truth the way I see it, you're being hurtful to me. You're being aggressive to me. You're hurting my feelings. And I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, there's truth, there's non-truth. And if you start going into it a little bit deeper, I start realizing that we live in a culture where truth is decided in a different way. And I'm going to call it the feel-good truth. How do you know what's true and what's false? How do people decide what's real or not? How do people decide, okay, what is right and what is wrong? They decide by what makes them feel good. I feel good to be a girl right now. It doesn't matter what I really am. If I feel good about being a girl, that means I'm a girl. I feel good about this. Doesn't matter what really happened. Okay, and again, we're using this emotional feel-good in order to decipher what is truth. We are turning our feelings into the truth filter. We are turning ourselves into gods. And what I'm trying to say is, this is a battle for much more than my people. This is a battle for more than Israel. This is a battle for the basic concept of what is right and what is wrong. Now, we can always argue. I can say this is right. Other people might disagree with me about what is right and what is wrong. But if you go and dissolve the concept of right and wrong, if you go and dissolve the concept of true and false, you've dissolved the concept of God in the public sphere. This is not a battle only for Israel. This is not a battle only for what's going on. This is a battle for godliness in the world that we live in today. And in this battle, I have to say it, I'm sorry, in this battle we're losing. We are losing the battle as we speak, because it's become more and more acceptable that truth is derived by who has more likes. I mean, think about it. I can just see it. Okay, somebody's going to write on his Twitter, X. Okay, the sky is green. Somebody else is going to write, the sky is blue. How do people decide now if the sky is green or the sky is blue? They don't do what we've been doing for millennium. They don't go outside and look at the sky. They look at the little line underneath, the guy who says green, the guy who says blue, and see who has more likes. And the guy who has more likes is speaking the truth. And more people feel good to follow him instead of the other side. You understand what's going on. And I'm stressing this because I think this is happening around us, underneath us, around us in a way that we're not paying attention. Not enough people are realizing that this is what's going on. People today take their truth not from the Bible, but from the internet. People decide what is going on, not from the Bible, not from the internet. I think I saw a statistic that something like 83% of the young people under the age of 25 take their news from Twitter and from TikTok. Okay? That's where they get their news. Now, here's a weird thing, though. Let me make this clear, okay? TikTok has an algorithm that decides how much this information is spread to how many people. Okay? Twitter has an algorithm. Instagram has an algorithm. Okay? And that algorithm decides how many likes this side is going to get and how many likes this side is going to get. And that algorithm is under control of people who write it. The deceiver knows mathematics. The deceiver has people in the right places to deceive the truth in the direction that he wants to go. It's not by chance that a lot of these algorithms are actually run in places, let's say in China, okay, where they have their own definition of what truth is and what truth should be. And what I'm trying to say is we're moving into a world where more and more truth is leaving the realm of both logic and Bible and moving into the realm of feeling good. How does that connect to all of us? Because lies are being spread about my people. Lies are being spread about what's going on in Israel. Lies are being spread about what's happening. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, how can people believe this lie? Why don't they check? Why don't they look out? Why don't they look out the window and see what's going on? And I realized that God has prepared the ground for people not to check, not to look. I came to the States a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and I thought, again, I've been a tour guide. I'm closely connected to the Calvary Chapel movement. I mean, most of my tour groups are Calvary Chapel churches in Israel. I know a lot of the pastors. I know a lot of the congregations. People have been on my tours for years. And my father-in-law is a Calvary Chapel pastor. Okay, so I'm inside. And these are people that have sat on the bus with me, toured the land with me, seen what's going on, that should know the truth. Sorry. This is before I break the glasses. That should know the truth. And I'm going to say, I find too much quiet about what's going on in Israel. People that I know, people that I'm following on YouTube, people that I'm following on Instagram, people all over the world that should have something to say about what's going on are being silent. And I realize that something else is going on. Okay? The deceiver is working overtime. And I don't know if you know, but he's got a lot of people working for him, okay? In the politics and everything else, all right? And the other side, the people who should not be deceived, are not being as loud and as noisy and outspoken as the ones who are being deceived. So what you get, if we live in an echo chamber, is you got a lot of noise from this side, and from the side of the people who use this as a way to govern their lives, you're hearing quiet. That is moving the truth in a certain direction. And what I'm here to say is that if Jesus is the way, the truth, and the person, the way, and the understanding that should be running your life, you should be fighting for the truth as much as you fight for anything else in your culture. Now, this has started before. And I'm seeing some of the things about all these gender identity things, about the fact that, people can decide that every truth is relevant. The fact that they're taking the truth of the parents away and handing it over to 8-year-olds. Okay? Since when does an 8-year-old know what is truth and what is false? That's what we're here for. That's our job as parents, is to teach him the truth. But if you hand the truth decision over to the 8-year-old or to the 6-year-old, I mean, since when do 8-year-olds know the truth? They believe in Superman and the Tooth Fairy. Okay? That's our job. And we're handing the truth over to the 8-year-olds. We're handing the truth over to the people who think they're victims. We're handing the truth over to the people that are very, very sensitive. And we're relenting and giving up our truth value to the enemy. Why am I here? To remind you that you have a responsibility to God's chosen people. By the way, we're the apple of God's eye. And the way I say it is, we not always are right, or the illustration I like to use is, we're GKs. Y'all know what a PK is? We're God's kids. We're the God's family. We're for some reason, I don't know why, but we were born into this family. We were born into this people. Now, it's been hard. It's not been easy. We've been persecuted. We've been murdered. We've assimilated more than anybody else. But never along the way have we quit being God's kids. And we are being attacked because we are God's kids. Not because we're good, not because we're better, but because this is the connection that we have. We're being attacked in our land because God has given us this land. So if you want to break the tie, and I'm going to say even something even a little bit more profound, and your pastor would probably agree with me. Without the Jewish people in their land, there is no sequence of events that lead to the end times. Meaning we had a role to play in the Old Testament. We were the backdrop for Jesus to come down and change the world. And we have a role to play in end times. So if we're not in our land, end times cannot happen. You guys following me on this one? So if the deceiver wants to break the plan, If the deceiver wants to move, the defense in a different direction, what do? You disassociate God, people, and land. And that is basically what's going on. So I need you to see that. You need to understand. But I was in Denver, I think, a couple of years ago, and we were talking about the fact that there is an attack on everything that you hold dear in the United States, in the American culture. People used to say, "In God we trust." I was a kid in third grade in Sunset Elementary School in Roswell, and we would stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. "In God we trust." I mean, we'd put our hands over our hearts and talk about the flag. You don't do that anymore. You've taken God out of the public sphere. You've moved them into something else. You've let other gods into this public sphere. You've let other religions into this public sphere. Why should it be a problem to say Merry Christmas to somebody? Why is it a problem? Oh, because other people will be upset, okay? Why isn't you? Why aren't we as Christians upset when we can't say? Why aren't we equal in this multiculturalism? And then I realized that one of the illustrations I got, a young teacher, the wife of one of the pastors, she says she was teaching in an elementary school somewhere in Colorado. She says, "I've got 4 Muslim girls in my class. And it's my job as a teacher in the public system to make sure that they adhere to their religion. We want this multi-religion, multicultural. So I have to make sure they wear the hijab. I have to make sure that they do their prayers. I have to make sure they don't take a bite of somebody else's sandwich, which is not, appropriate." She says, "But if I close my eyes and say thank you to Jesus for my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I get in trouble." You all know that truth. You realize what is happening. And I realized that there is a war to delegitimize Israel, and you're seeing it happening as we speak. But there is also a war to delegitimize truth and godliness in your culture. We are fighting the same battle. Now, I'm not going to say I don't have an objective here, but I'm going to say this. We're being too silent. The other side is being noisy. The other side is willing to deceive. The other side is willing to lie. And we're saying, okay, we're not sure. We haven't educated ourselves. Maybe we shouldn't have an opinion. What I'm trying to say is if you don't stand up and fight for the truth, there will be no truth in this land a year from now, a generation from now. Your children are going to grow up in a completely different environment from the one that you grew up in. And just like how am I going to say this? I am deeply ashamed that my enemy deceived me into thinking that it's not a problem, that we can appease, that we can accept things that are totally unacceptable to me, but we can accept them because we don't want to make a balagan. Balagan is a mix-up, a mess-up. We don't want to make an issue about it. Okay, let's not fight. So the person in the cubicle next to me, okay, is not willing for me to say Merry Christmas. I'm not going to make an issue of it. Okay, I'm not going to fight about it because to be confrontational is not comfortable. It doesn't make me feel good. Okay? And just like we said they want to reach an agreement with us. They want to work in our factories. They want to be a part of this new story. And we allowed them to deceive us into feeling that it's not worth the fight. It's not worth making an issue of it. We can deal with this relatively quiet situation just like we did with our enemies. You're doing with your enemy. You're sitting here and you're saying, let's not make an issue of it. Okay, they've decided to change this. They've decided to take God out of this. We're not going to fight for this. They've decided that everything is relevant, everything is true. I mean, how can somebody say everybody has his own truth and people who read the Bible don't get up and scream? How come people can spread on the internet lies about gender, lies about rights, lies about God? Okay, I heard your famous football player, soccer player just now said, there's no God because God didn't do something that I wanted to do. She's got purple hair, I think. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. But what I'm saying, how come people aren't standing up and saying, you want to fight against God, you're fighting against me. You want to fight against truth, you're fighting against me. And what I'm coming here to say is, we got smacked. We got kicked. We got terribly, terribly mutilated because we let the deceiver deceive us. Let our example be a lesson to you. Please. The war that you're fighting is as important as the war that we're fighting. The people that we're fighting, the ideology that we're fighting, the Satan that we're fighting there is the same Satan that you should be fighting here, and you're not. And I'm not saying you personally, because I know you are the people who have come to hear the truth. But more and more people have allowed Satan to move them into a sense of security, a sense of prosperity, a sense of quiet. Look at what's happening in your colleges. I mean, the erosion of truth in the center of learning, okay, is so completely wrong. And what I'm saying is, if we don't stand up and fight for the truth today, there's going to be no truth left for our children tomorrow. And I'm here to say it's time to make a difference. It's time to make a stand. And here's the thing. The deceiver is using all kinds of tools. Algorithms, platforms, demonstrations. There's no reason that we as God's people cannot use the same tools. Please start using the tools. Use the weapons. Use your Facebook. Use your Instagram. Use your Twitter account. Start spreading the truth. Start not accepting the misinformation. Start standing up. Use the same. If somebody says something that is untrue, Israel is committing a genocide. By the way, anybody who says that on Twitter, that is called hate speech. And just like when you say something about Jesus, you can be canceled. Somebody says something that is hate speech, they can be canceled. Cancel them. Cancel the people who don't accept. Cancel. Fight the war for truth. Because if we don't fight the war for truth, God will be taking out of this sphere. And it's not by chance that we knew there was company coming. Now, guys, let me make this clear. Some of the people are never going to be convinced. We're not going to convince everybody. And I've got a really nice quote, I think, somewhere here from a guy named Mark Twain. I don't know if you've ever heard about him. Who literally says this: "The truth has no defense against the fool who is determined to believe a lie." There are some people we're not going to convince. But as Christians, as Bible-believing Christians, we have a role to try. We have a role, we have a calling to do our best. And I don't know if it's not too late. Again, I'm not a prophet. I don't know how this is going to happen, okay? But we are judged by the standards, by the fruit that we produce. And I believe that we, the Bible-reading, truth-loving, God-connected people in the world, are not producing enough fruit. And I think it's time to make a difference. It's time to go a little bit further. And it's not by chance that, the Bible told us that this was going to happen. And I do want to tie in one of the pieces from the book of Timothy that I kind of find connected to this. And it says this. I'm in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2. And what he says is this. He says, preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. And by the way, now is the season. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all the long suffering and the teaching. Meaning, don't just wait for it to happen. Push it. Push it out. For the time will come, and this is what he wrote 2,000 years ago, okay? A time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. They will not endure the truth of the world. They will not endure what is right and what is wrong, but according to their own desires, because they have an itching in their ears, okay, they will turn their ears away from the truth. They have an itching in their ears. They will heap up for them false teachers, professors, media people, influencers, okay? And they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. But verse 5 is what's important here. But you, each and every one of you, be watchful in all things. Endure afflictions, because this is not going to be easy. You might be canceled. You might have a price to pay. Do the work of an evangelist. You have to evangelize. You have to spread the truth and fulfill your ministry. This is what God put on my heart for me, and hopefully I'm putting this on your heart for you. You have to be watchful. You have to realize that these false gods, these false teachers are rising. You have to realize that they're distorting the truth, and it's your job to fulfill your ministry, each and every one of you. You have to do that for me, and I expect you to go on the war front for Israel, but I expect you to go on the war front for the truth. And let's connect to Proverbs, which I think always makes a big difference. This is Proverbs chapter 22, verse 21. I'm here that I may make you know the certainty of the words of truth, that you may answer the words of truth to those who sent you. Please put that on your refrigerator or on your desktop or words, because you have to speak the words of truth to all of those who send you. It's time to make a difference. It's time to make a difference for God's chosen people. It's time to make a difference for what's going on in the Middle East. It's time to make a difference for everybody around you, that he will be prepared for when it does happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen soon. It's time to make a difference for the godliness in your society. You are a culture, a society, okay, that was built on Judeo-Christian ethics, and built on Judeo-Christian values. Your founding fathers might not have all been born-again Christians, but they allowed godliness to seep through their fingers into the founding of this great nation. And now you're taking it back out. It's time to make a difference in the war on truth, because otherwise your children will be living in a world of deceit. And you know who rules the realm of deceit. It's time to stand up and make a difference. And I think that's what God sent me here.